Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Real Talk, Real Men, where we are mindfully redefining masculinity. I'm your moderator, Justin, the Change Artist, and I want to thank all the gentlemen for joining me here today. Today, we're going to be talking about a shift in priorities as we were all shook by the global pandemic this year. I want to talk more specifically about the chance it gave us to look into ourselves and how we handled all that. Barry, I love starting off with you because you're the one with the most life experience. So,
Oh, thank you. I'm the oldest one. Thank you so much. This is getting a bit shaggy now. So, in some ways, nothing changed because I was already working from home on my laptop with my phone.
okay.
And the thing is, and I actually decided to do more exercise. My exercise was so random before this. When we shut down, it's almost like I became rebellious. I had to get out of the house. So once a day, I went out of the house and exercised. And then I was lucky enough to get an Apple Watch, which made things even more crazy because now I've got this coach on my wrist reminding me to get up off the chair or go for walks. And now I'm basically committed to, I'm out of the house like an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, biking or hiking or walking as a daily commitment to myself. So I can now get away with eating all the bread. So that's one of the things. But in terms of business, what's changed is that I've actually had a big shift in terms of what I'm doing now, what I'm actually about to do. There's been a shift in my work because a friend of mine came back into my life who was one of my, I won't say clients, she was a champion for my work and she loves what I do. And she just went through a very messy divorce. And she wants to put together something which I didn't think about before. It was about how we are now facing, for a lot of people who've been through the pandemic, a lot of grief. A lot of people right now are going through so much. It's either I've lost a few friends through the pandemic. I lost one yesterday. Somebody I knew through the radio station I used to volunteer with, who died through COVID complications, and he was like in his 40s. Also, loss of freedoms people have had to stay at home and can't go and do things. A loss of jobs, a loss of so many things that we forgot we can't do anymore. Just the fact now is that I can't just pop down the store if I want to. Right now, I'm in LA. And we just come out of one lockdown after 3 in a row, where we can now go to the stores again, which we couldn't do up until like a week and a half ago, except for the grocery stores. So to go to the pharmacy or to go to clothing store, I have to plan ahead, thinking, okay, can I do that? Because I share a house with somebody who's elderly, and so I have to be aware of their health more than my own. They're high risk than I am. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm a high risk. I feel like I'm 25 sometimes. But also I'm taking a lot of supplements that I know will help build my defenses. I think the biggest thing I'm grieving is the lack of hugs that I have now for the last, 8, 9, 10 months. There are so many friends I would hug. I see friends, 6, 7 days a week. And on Sundays, I'd see 300 people I know and we'd hug each other. And I haven't had a hug from a friend in 9 months, 10 months.
Oh, wow.
So that's one of the things that I didn't think about until I was looking at it going, damn, I feel like I'm missing that.
Yeah.
So it's lots of layers of things that we've lost and missing that we're going through. So grief is really one of the things that I think a lot of us haven't acknowledged yet, because I really feel that for some of us, we need to acknowledge what the wound is inside that we're still carrying, because we've been suppressing that because we're trying to make do and everything's okay. But I'm feeling a lot of people are going to start hitting, and I've been talking to people who are psychologists and therapists. This is becoming a prevalent theme for them with their clients, that people are starting to face the facts that life isn't the same anymore. Mm-hmm. So there's feelings coming up that and a lot of people aren't seeing a therapist or a coach or a counselor to voice that. So, the suicide rate went up. People overdosing on opioids, all sorts of things have been happening because there's a side effects of being in lockdown.
Yeah, anyway, and this inability to cope with the change, for sure.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming for them.
Yeah. I didn't mean to end on a downer, but it's kind of where I ended. So,
yeah, no, that's really true. Because I know for me, one of the things, as someone that's on the opposite end of the spectrum that you were talking about, as far as having so many people to just meet and greet and get a hug from on the weekends, I was kind of on the opposite end where I was already kind of a homebody. I went out when I had to. It's not that I avoided people, but I didn't mind not running into them. So I timed my day around that. And so when the pandemic hit, I at first I wasn't, during the first phase, maybe during phase 1 and 2, I wasn't so much affected. But then after it kind of lingered on, after the year ended, and it was still after we got towards the end of the year, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and it was still, wear your mask, don't go into large groups, this, that, and the other. It's kind of annoying. Like, I don't not really a fan of this, you know? So I myself started looking for people to see. And I normally I just kind of feel a person out like, hey, I'm a hugger. Do you mind if that's how I say hi? You know, now I don't even ask sometimes. I just see the open body language and I'm like, hey, great to see you, person, human being. I love you. I'm glad you're alive. Let's connect sometime.
Yeah.
So definitely there's this interpersonal like shift that's going on. But also, like you mentioned, there wasn't a lot of people with the distraction of work that were taking the time to take care of themselves and really address the grief, not just from the pandemic, but just the grief in their lives, you know, trauma, abuse, all this other stuff that we can get into. But more specifically, before I kick it off to Kinyo or to Kevin, is the exercise, the physical exercise. So before, riding my bike or doing some pull-ups was more, you know, let's just spend this extra energy before I go to bed so I'm not up all night, you know. But with the pandemic, it gave me the room to spend even just an extra 10 minutes on an exercise, not just pumping out more reps, you know, but really getting to know my body and taking the time to feel what muscles were being activated and the order in which they were being activated, and using my breath to pull myself up literally to the bar and really build that mind body connection through exercise was one of the dramatic shifts that I experienced during the pandemic, because I didn't have the time to do that before. With the pandemic and the whole world kind of forced to slow down and given the time to reflect, I can breathe into the exercise and feel what's happening. And it's really helped on this journey that I'm on as far as balancing myself out as a man and manning down, so to speak, and not letting the triggers that used to fire off so easily be fired off, you know. And for me, it came through the form of physical fitness and being able to give that special kind of attention to it, that I'm starting to see some ripples in my life from the benefits of it. I don't know if Kenya or Kevin, if you guys in another aspect of your life, whether it's business, career, personal, where the pandemic gave you the time and the energy to just kind of focus more on it in a different way, you know, and any benefits you got from that.
Want to go, Mr. Captain Kevin?
Okay, yeah, I think that pretty much what it did was, I'm a hip hop artist, and so I had just turned 30 January 5th, so now I'm in the new decade here. And but most of my 20s, literally, like this isn't even an exaggeration, almost every single day, at least once or a couple of times a week, I spent the majority of my life in the public eye, as far as performing, as far as throwing events, as far as everything like that. And so I didn't realize how much that was a part of my day-to-day DNA until that was gone, until I went 236 days without performing, which was the longest I had ever did. And like midway in the pandemic, there was an event that, me and Kinyo was actually able to perform at. It was like, whoa, like I did, like me, I love being to myself, but that's where I had my person to person interactions. That's when I was able to interact as far as with people and bring out my Libra ascended sign, who's just like a completely different person. Like people, you see me at home and be like, man, you seem so dark. Like, and I'm just all like, when I'm not around people, I love being in knowledge. I love being in my thoughts and different things like that. So when it came to the being at home part, that wasn't necessarily the biggest issue. It was more so as far as not having that regular contact with, as far as group of people, being able to perform on a stage, versus on, a Zoom or online or different things like that. It's a completely different energy. So that particular feedback, that physical actual energy that you get being, in that crowd of people, or just the interactions that I would have, and the fun random conversations, because I love hearing people's stories. Literally, people would come up to me and they just feel very comfortable speaking to me because I listen, I give them my direct attention, and people really appreciate that. And I notice how much people didn't really get that, you know. So when we did have the pandemic, I just transitioned as far as doing more interviews, you know, and having that one-to-one, having the Zoom calls, and I would see how the people on the other end would be feeling super happy because they're just like, I'm interacting, you know, with someone. And even though it's on the interview in regards to my interests, so it would be either cannabis, astrology, tiny homes, you know, just the wide range of stuff, the conversations are so just chill and personal that I see what this does. I don't think many people fully understand like being able to see people's faces, even though it's digitally, works wonders for people's emotional health. I understood on a very deep personal level the word loneliness. Now, a lot of people look at that word as like a very negative thing, you know, even the word alone. But there was this one video that I saw, and he broke that down. In the word alone, it says all one, you know. And so, even though it may feel loneliness, it's understanding, having that time to be able to go within yourself and be like, whoa, I'm more connected by connecting more into myself and my interests. Whenever like these forums or going into something as simple as like going on a lo-fi channel on YouTube and being able to comment back and forth with people is amazing. You know, of course there's going to be trolls out there. There's trolls in, you know, regular life anyways, but being able to navigate through that. So I think that a big perception shift for me was just realizing on a personal and business level, because everything kind of happened as I'm closing out this decade of my 20s, you know. So it's like I go into the 30s pulling out the rumble of destruction and chaos that you know is this pandemic, but I also have everything that I dealt with within my 20s that allowed me to be like, okay, I get to go into my 30s and now I have a better understanding on things that I actually want to focus on. A lot of my 20s was dissolving expectations that I thought on how things should have been or should have turned out. And, you know, recently my great grandfather had passed, not due to COVID, due to old age. And it was peaceful in his sleep. And it just made me go back and think to my interactions with him as a kid. Like he was a vet, so he would, I want to say he was an air pilot, but he would make, as far as these little model planes out of, he would take motors out of remote control cars and use that as the engine, and he would use stuff around the house to make the propellers and the body out of cereal boxes and salt and pepper, you know, tops for the wheels and everything like that. And I remember as a kid, me and him doing that, to the point that when I got home, I would sit up there doing it, not realizing that he gave me the permission not just to create, but to create without expectations. By the time I was born, he was already in his 60s, you know, so he wasn't doing this, and did it all the way up into his passing. So he wasn't trying to do it out of getting money or anything like that. That was just something that he loved to do. And what it made me think was like, you know, he was in his 90s, so he lived 2 more lifetimes than what I am right now. And it made me think of the journey, how a level of completion by being able to go through your path, and is a simple life as he had. I realized we're all able to have that. Us as men, us being able to provide, have, as far as this abundant, you know, family and grandchildren, great great grandchildren, and for him to see that to completion and to pass in his sleep like it's all a dream. You know, I can't even be fully like sad in a negative way. It's to me, it's very it was very honorable. So being able to look at that in perspective of my life, it's just all like, all right, this is this journey that I'm going on, and it's okay to grieve. It's okay to feel. it's okay to not have everything figured out. You know, like it's completely fine. And I think that above everything within this pandemic, the two main things that the two main words that really that I feel carried with me was acceptance and faith. Like those two things were something that helped me continuously, you know, acceptance and faith. Acceptance doesn't mean bending over, turning over, anything like that. It's just accepting reality where you are right now and being able to have like, okay, you can't possibly know where it is you're trying to go to. You accept where you are. And so those are the two big things.
Boom. Holy smokes. I don't know how you follow that up. Kinyo, you want
Yeah,
to
no, that's perfect. That's why I waited till last, because I was like, let me hear, because after Barry, I was like, okay, cool. One, I don't know Barry, but now I know him a little bit better. I was like, I got to hear him talk. But and then Kevin, I want to something that Kevin said, which was the aloneness. I want to touch on that because I feel like that was the really cool part, because I feel like really the pandemic was one of the best things that ever happened to me in a certain kind of way for who I am, because I'm a very mental person. So when I went into the pandemic, it just meant everything was turned up. It was almost like a gift, like I wrote more, I made more stuff. Like alone for me is a pretty sweet deal. And I think it's been part of like how I did things as a kid. I always part of the reason I actually think I started drawing was so that I would have something to do when there was nothing to do. Like I was like, oh, if I can draw a little bit, then when I'm super bored, when everyone is bored and they're like sitting on the plane or doing whatever, I'm doing Picassos. I never got that good with drawing, but at least I can have fun with the creativity, So, and I think people find different ways to do that. But I think I spent a lot of time alone as a kid, even though I had 3 siblings, but the closest to me in age was 6 years, and they're all 1 year apart. So, they did all their stuff together. And I never felt lonely, I was just actually, it's interesting. One of my favorite things is to be in a house and to hear noise, but to be alone in my room. Like, that's just like one of my favorite things. Cause I'm like, okay, everyone's happy. Like, that's why I like Christmas and Thanksgiving, like all this stuff's going on, but like, I get to do my own thing, but no one's like saying, oh, where is he or anything like that. I don't know. Like, I just thought that was one of my things. So I think I have a weird relationship with loneliness. And I think poetry, not a weird relationship. I think I have a good relationship with loneliness. And I think poetry helps a lot of that. And I think poetry actually, I think, gave me an excuse to examine my thoughts. I realized it's just made me a consistent journaler. They might not have all been poems. It might have just been, I didn't want to feel like I was a little kid writing in his diary. I wanted to feel like a grown man, doing some deep stuff. And so poetry gave me the license to take, diary notes, but feel very cool about it at the same time. In general, I think that poetry helps when you write down notes, it's not even poetry, notes help you to understand your consciousness. As humans, we're just alive for so long, like we're alive for so long. And I don't know if that sounds weird or anything like that, but I'm just like, if you think about the stuff you were thinking like 7 years ago, you really have no idea, And I think having a way to break down this stuff, because it's so different. We're so different. We change so much. We might not change that much, but like we lose the context of what that thing is. For instance, I don't think anyone's ever going to understand what the pandemic was like if you didn't live through it. And I'm sure there was other stuff like that happened to me that happened before I lived. But I think the pandemic is a unique experience in a social media age and the way it went down and the type of loneliness, because Kevin was talking about it. And I was like, when people were happy to do those interviews, I don't think we really understand why they were so happy, because it wasn't just that you couldn't see people. It was that there was an order shift. There was, things changed. And it was more of the anxiety. I think a lot of the pandemic was human stuff. It was us looking at us. You know, we were looking at our own anxieties. We were looking at the way we do stuff. And I think one thing that helps with that for me is poetry. I think we don't take enough notes. So for me, it went into a lot more note taking. And what that did for me is it blew my mind. I didn't even realize, the stuff I had going on up here. And when I started putting it down and translating it and taking it more seriously, I actually have a very serious view on note taking right now. I think that is one of the main things that people are not doing. You have the ideas. They come during the day, different things, because your brain creates outputs. It's like, you just have to write them down. You know, like, and it's not just that, but like just in general, writing is so great. So the increase of writing, I didn't even know that I was distant from writing. And actually since then, I think I've gotten a little bit more distant again, now that things are picking back up. You just don't realize that when things are moving, they take you away from the real cool art stuff. And what it made me realize is, I need to dip out sometimes. I need to create my own Corona. Where I go somewhere else and I get into loneliness. I need to go to London for 2 weeks and write down some notes. I'm not going to break through to the next level if I don't. It was a technology. I learned the technology of loneliness again through Corona. So and how to move through that, because I think there's so much to go there. There's in the notes, there's so many things, because there's so many ways in which we're organizing our lives that we don't even think about, that we never say, but we are using lots of different tools. We're using intricate. And I know, Justin, I know you deal with that heavily. You help people, people don't know what they're doing. You help people understand some of the things that are going on there and shift that in different ways. What the coping of it for me was going back, I think, to my old coping mechanisms and realizing there was a lot in there. I feel like there was something Barry said that, like, it was actually just like a tone that he said. Like you laid a tone. Yours, it was very interesting because you brought it in perfectly, and Justin picked you for the right reasons. So much life experience, because when you look at these things in the grand context, I think it's interesting. And so I got some of that from just the way that you described it. I'm gonna have to go back and listen to yours. I felt like there was something I wanted to say about just the rhythm of the way that you said things and the way that things changed. And I think that, what are our coping mechanisms? What are the methods of stability that we use in times that feel weird? Mm-hmm. And I think it was a good time to take a look at that, because was coronavirus super duper significant medically? I don't know. Like, I'm not medically up to being able to say these type of things, but it was super duper significant when it showed us what we're doing. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's my little.
Yeah. I think the theme between all of us is
our little thing. Actually, I feel like I was summing up everyone's really.
No, yeah, for sure. And I think because because of the fact that we're all on this show for a reason, mm-hmm. we were all kind of already on that self-discovery journey, that self-healing,
right,
wanting to be better in that balance. But I think Barry pointed it out in the opening, was that it really forced a shift on everyone's self-care and how much they're really healing and what they're doing, because they didn't have the distraction of work. They couldn't go to work for 8 hours and ignore it. They were forced to sit at home and think and deal with these things that come up over and over again. And I mean, depending on your partner, if they're a little timid and they just kind of put up with it, I guess it wasn't really an issue. But me as a coach got a lot of calls from people saying, hey, I think it's about time I finally deal with this. And I think the big shift in priority wasn't so much, it went from pleasing and building and maintaining the facade that people put out into the world of this, successful up and coming individual that's knocking out their life goals, and said, hey, look, man, I'm actually losing my hair at night because of the stress of maintaining this facade. And I don't know what it takes. I don't even know what it means. I don't even know what life is right now. I'm doing what I was trained to do. They didn't teach me any real life skills in school. They taught me how to read and write an email in the correct freaking format. I'm just fulfilling the machine I was building. So I feel like the shift went from fulfilling the societal norms to, hey, what do I really want? Who am I really? You know, the pandemic forced us into a little box. And like Kinyo said, for most of us in the room, loneliness is probably a friend. We probably here will have a few minutes or hours to ourselves. We're like, oh my God, yes, okay, cool. I can catch up on some stuff. But for the rest of the world, that's pretty scary, because then they have to sit with their thoughts. And their thoughts aren't always as friendly or as inviting as the ones that we've learned to have, you know, because now they're forced to face traumas and maybe even be accountable for things that they've been denying in the past. You know, I know that was the thing for me. I ran out of excuses, pacing in my living room for things I did 5 years ago. I was like, you know what? I really don't have any excuses anymore. I was a douchebag when that happened, and I did and said those things. But not everyone can handle them like that. And I know for us in that space, it's kind of playful and we can consciously jump into it. But for other people, it's work, you know. And there was this big scramble, I feel, for where do I start? You know, what does it take? So for me, as far as coaching to help people through that, it went from this keeping them ignorant about the process, because I always felt like they didn't need to know that. It was unnecessary. They don't care about how it works. They just want it to work. So why bother educating them on that, you know? Into this, hey, look, this is what we're into, this more compassionate, caring, empathetic type of coach, where it's like, look, what you're going to go through is uncomfortable, and the way I'm going to help you is unconventional, but you're going to feel okay, and I'm with you 100% of the way. I just need you to promise me that no matter how uncomfortable it gets through all that, that you're here and you're going to show up and you're going to go through this process, you know? And I had this very systematic approach to doing all of that with people. And after the pandemic, when I got what I call a little more, when I got mushy, right? When I healed, there was a lot of things that were built into that structure of business, right? Like, make sure you do this to get the sale, make sure you approach it like that so you can ask for the review and it's not weird and it seems more natural, and just this very structured, rigid process to follow when it came to dealing with clients, right? I left that behind and I started to just show them that I cared more, because I did. And part of me wanted the human interaction, you know? And it completely shifted things. I didn't have to ask for reviews. I got Raven reviews. I didn't have to tell them to refer people. They referred them themselves, you know. And when we talk about shifts, it really helped me realize, like, oh wow, the energy really does have a tangible effect. Like, it's not just something they write about in books, and I always thought it was someone's personal experience, you know. Oh, I felt this power. This is what it was for me. But after experiencing this in the pandemic, when I just put this energy out there and I get all these results, I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm not really doing anything different other than showing that I care as much as I always did. I've always cared this much. Thanks to the pandemic, I can show that I care this much to these clients, because I'm not so much about the dollar, you know. And it just really opened my eyes to the energetic exchange that really happens in this universe, and what is really valuable here when it comes to the time and energy you put into the work, into your playtime, into your hobbies, into the way you de-stress, into the way you start your day, you know. And it really shifted things on a tiny level, because it helped me understand the bigger picture, which made the details that much more important, you know. And for me, as not just a coach, but as a person and as a man, it really opened me up to feeling a lot more, you know, and allowing myself to feel everything, happiness, sadness, joy, everything, instead of just letting my chest tighten, you know, fighting the ball in my throat and then finding an excuse to carry that tension throughout my life. You know, it's like, hey man, cry. It's happy to see other people getting married and expressing their love for themselves. Just fucking cry real quick, shed a tear or two, you know, enjoy that. Give yourself permission to feel that one day, you know. And I think before the pandemic, business and coaching and be successful at doing what you love was clouding my mind, that I would have missed the connection, the real connection with people that has changed everything and really changed my life personally without the pandemic. And so when we talk about shifts and priorities, like on a deeper level, that's one of them that really affected me. And that's one of them that I think a lot of people see, because there's people around me that they don't say anything for their own reasons, but I can see it in their face. I can see it on their eyes. Like, I'm not looking at Justin before Corona right now. Like, who is, but whatever, he's happy. Let's just leave him alone, you know? And it's really fun. It's really exciting. And it feels like a whole new world. And it took some effort to not break into song there, but go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the other time I see that kind of look on people's faces when they come back from like a trip, you know, that was really important for them. Like they come and they're just like, oh, okay, I see.
For sure. It's like
the thing that they say just about that is that one of the things that I know the journey for a lot of us has been is to be more present.
Mm-hmm.
Because that and especially for masculine men, presence is one of our gifts to the world. So it's not like what you were doing, what we're all doing. I think because for me, it's interesting because for a lot of people, the pandemic changed their whole lives because they weren't pre-warned or pre-advised for that. I've been immersed in the personal growth work for over 30 years. So before Kevin was born, I started in the mid-'80s, and so I've done a lot of internal clearing, resolving, healing, transformational work for a long time, and not as much presently because I've been living it. So when the pandemic hit, I had a lot more, I wouldn't say tools in my tool belt, but also I've been through enough that when the pandemic hit, it was like, oh, it's not so bad. It's not like it's going to change everything. And yeah, I already said that my career was based on home business, laptop type stuff. So it wasn't changing that much, but also the way the world was interacting, it was watching people around me having more challenge. And so in a lot of ways, I was holding that space saying, I get it. I know how you feel. I'm not there, thankfully, but I hold the space. And so, and going out for walks, and I started diving into audiobooks and other things that I hadn't been doing because I didn't make time for those things. So for me, unlike Kinyo was journaling, which isn't necessarily my thing, but taking more information in and being more present, listening to things and learning more stuff, and even just listening to like podcasts and things that I had listened to for a long time because I didn't make time for it. It's been really helpful. But the other thing as well, just to put another layer on top of that, because besides the pandemic, the last 9-10 months, we've had a lot of stuff happening on both the political and the societal issues that have been coming through that have been, it feels like in some ways, it's the analogy I keep using, it's like we've got so much light coming forward and people waking up and becoming conscious that the darkness is getting more concentrated like a big zit. So energetically, it's like this concentration of the people who are attached to an old way of thinking or a negative way of thinking or an againstness or a judgmental one up, one down type stuff. And so it's getting concentrated. So what's happened, I feel, over the last, since August or September, certainly from the election to now, has been a lot of that eruption of upset. And it ain't over yet. For a lot of, I mean, even though politically it's over, but as of what happened, just started today was the start of the hearings, there's still people who are really living in a place of upset and distress and frustration. And I have quite a few friends of mine who were in the conscious spiritual community who started going way off to the far right conspiracy theories. And that was something that at first was a real shock because I'm like, don't they see this is not real? And then I was starting to think, it's like, am I missing something? Maybe I should jump in too. I think you're like, hang on, they're doing it. I should do it too because I trust them. But then I started really getting reality checks, thankfully, from friends of mine who was like, no, just watch. And there's actually a group of some of my friends and some of their friends who are in the conscious community. They're proactive spiritual leaders in Austin who are actually building a community by a lake. And they're calling it something like the Placid Community, something like that. But it feels like they're basically fortifying their position of being right, literally and figuratively. They're building a community that's going to have, they're going to have a couple of like ex-SEALs there as well. Like they're going to really make this thing defendable. And I'm like, what happened to this understanding of expansion and unity and embracing? They're now in a place where they don't trust anybody else. And so what I got clearly is that there are people who are doing the work who are doing it as lip service.
Yeah.
They're in this journey, they're progressing through the journey for the accolades and for knowing people, but they're not actually doing internal transformational work so that they become more like ping pong balls. They get pushed around by what's happening outside. And so what I'm aware of is that my communities I've been part of for 20, 30 years, some of the leaders in those communities have fallen out. They walked away. They've tried to persuade other people to follow them off the cliff. And that's been one of the more distressing things in terms of my experience of people who I thought I knew, who now realize I don't know. And that's been kind of saddening, because I thought they would be more aware of what is authentic truth and what is propaganda. And I come from a Jewish background, so especially, frankly, this is one thing that triggered me. Come from a Jewish background, and I learned in school and from ancestry about what happened in Germany during the war and everything else. To see that mindset showing up here in this country and in LA, we had riots and protests enough in LA too, same as other places. Was a shock to my cultural system. I'll put it that way. So it's been an interesting journey. Besides the pandemic, a whole other layer of what's going on in our world.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely noticed too. And it's funny that you brought that up, Barry, because it's just like in the spiritual community, the conscious community, that was one of the things that I completely saw unravel in front of my eyes in 2020. And it was just like, oh, this is very, very interesting, because like you said, there's certain people who, they're trying to get people to follow them off of cliffs. And it's like misery loves company. And, that was something that I noticed a while back, was that I started going into a lot of these conscious and spiritual communities. And I was all like, oh man, some of the most quote unquote conscious and spiritual people are actually the most broken. And that is dangerous, and that is very, very dangerous, And so when I started seeing it, I would see friends who would, really jump on, like you said, a bunch of like the conspiracies. It was just so interesting to see, but there was a level of empathy that I developed, because of that. For me, I felt like a part of them, some of them doing that was literally for that quote unquote connection. Anything to get some people to see me, hear what it is that I'm saying, make me feel relevant. There's so much of that. I feel like what it allowed for things to happen is that it needed what we saw on Capitol Hill, what we saw with everything that was going on. It was just like an accumulation of people who felt like, hey, this is how I feel. And what that showed was another subset of people that felt like, you can do that. Like it was just one of those things where they were able to see that facade. It's just like at the end of the day, so much inner work needed to go down. Like there was so much privilege sprinkled about throughout this, and people who would sit up here and not understand my sarcasm, and all of a sudden I would lose friends. It's all like, oh, you're pro Biden, you're pro Kamala Harris, and da 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 da. I'm just all like, whoa, hold up there, buddy. What it is that I'm pro is just people being able to exercise, like people exercising their right, people doing the things that they said here in America that we're able to do. Pick whoever it is that you're going to pick, but that it's not like I see the back and forth between left and right, and I'm just like, oh, this is hilarious, because y'all are both two sides of the same coin.
To jump in on that, I think to go back on kind of the idea of the thoughts, or and what Barry said about listening to podcasts or watching films, I think that's so cool, because that's kind of what I did too. And I think it's again this exploration of these thoughts, because I think what happens when you don't, because interestingly, before the pandemic, my main content was articles, poetry, music, and business content, which is kind of what the articles were about. Now, as I dove deep into myself and breaking down all these things, they didn't rise to the table as much. I think there's a lot of things where it's like the thoughts, if you don't, like, I think listening to podcasts and writing film, I think it's actually the same thing as writing. Because when you're reading someone else's writing, it's about the rhythm. I think you put yourself on there, you know, and so you're able to do the exact same thing. You're breaking down, you know, all these different thoughts. And I feel like when people don't do that work, then it bubbles out. And are you really saying anything? No, because the confidence of thought is supposed to, you got to process it out. What's interesting now, my main content is, because funnily enough, after I got deep inside myself, I had less need to put myself out there in that kind of way, to tell people, for someone to read about every single time me, you know, because I break down everything in my poem. I'll break down, you know, the different relationships and different things I went through, especially the stuff that I feel like antagonizes me, because, yeah, whatever. I think it's the coolest, and I'm not. But you know, it wasn't supposed. I didn't need everyone to be on every one of those steps. And what that got me to is, ooh, all right, this area is actually handled. I'm gonna write a really cool book in about 2 to 3 years, because I'm on a new level with that. But funnily enough, the best content that I'm putting out right now, I mean, not the best, but the content that I'm putting out right now is, because I started thinking about the consumer more, is art. And funnily enough, skateboarding. And to bridge that in, because skateboarding was a huge passion of mine as a kid. And funnily enough, there's this major skateboarding podcast. I listened to like every episode of it, right? And that was the blend of my thoughts coming into this new place where do you put your anxiety? Where do you put your angst? Because those aren't fake things. You're not supposed to not feel. Sometimes I think we underestimate the true wobbliness of reality, and that our own selves desiring to manifest narrative. And so I think when you don't handle the thoughts, when you don't have a mechanism of processing those out, then you become a sort of sub type of thing. I don't even know what to call it, but I want to play angel's advocate here, something that I don't usually do. I usually do the opposite. But angel's advocate, I actually think a lot of people are doing the same thing that I do with skateboarding. A lot of people are finding the right places to put their anxiety. They're becoming more of that. They're creating more art. They're putting out more art. You know, they're reinventing themselves. They're going, like, I think a lot of people are figuring that stuff out. Of course, there's going to be the people, and they're going to seem loud. There's going to be the people who are getting loud about, like, but the cool thing about them is they don't have any real reality connected to their actions. That's what we saw at the Capitol thing. That was ridiculous. And then they were shocked at the reality, shocked that they got mace sprayed in their face when they attacked the government building of the biggest government around right now. And they were shocked because there's just a disconnection. Yes, there are places for that kind of craziness, but you have to figure out where it is. It's good on a canvas. It's good on a skateboard. It's good on you trying to build your next, you know, version of whatever. You can build something that actually fixes what you're worried about.
But the thing's also, I'm going to say, but the thing is, you're doing that yourself, which is what, if those people at the Capitol had all followed their own inner guidance like you are, that would never have happened.
Yeah. Right. And I think most people are doing it. I really think that those types of people, it's a couple of different angles, I think, that are going on there. I don't even think that's who they are. It's a little bit of just, we're seeing, you know, only the products of where they were misled, and they had like a vacuum of being misled, and we're just seeing them from the wrong angle and the wrong time, but they also did the wrong thing. And so that's, I don't feel sorry for you.
Yeah, right.
You got to learn for yourself, and everyone else got to learn. That calmed everybody down, for real. Everyone was like, oh, it's going to get worse next time. It's not going to get worse next time. When people saw, when you do stupid stuff, it doesn't work, and it just looks really stupid and disgusting, think they're going to get together and try to do that again. No, that calmed that was one of the biggest shame moments. It was building up all through, and I'm not even talking just about like Trump, or I really honestly don't have opinions on a federal level, because it's just not where I go with my thinking. If I'm going to go there, then I'm going to go there, and we can go there, and I'm going to do some research and stuff. But I don't really have thinking, but the shame that was playing out, and it kept getting delayed, and then it just manifested. But it calmed everyone down, and they realized there are wrong ways to empower narrative, and there are right ways. I shouldn't be a 31-year-old skater. I'm using my power to fight narrative to do what I want to do. And I think there's so much room for that. There's so little pushback against that outside of our own heads. But until we deal with that, because it's random stuff. Your dad said this to you. Your mom said this to you. You did this to that person. You did this to this person, but you don't deal with that. You don't break it down. It never gets to turn into anything other than you actually start to empower it and to be like, and to make excuses for it when really you just needed to process out the thoughts. Hear a podcast where someone else says something that strikes a point of maturity to where you can be like, oh, that's just the thing. That's not me. That's just the thing, you know?
Absolutely. I'm getting thumbs up and cheers.
I know, this is so much good stuff, man. Awesome, y'all are doing awesome.
For sure. I want to thank all you guys for joining me, man. I love your insight and stuff. And
let me just say it was awesome. And why it was awesome is because if anyone watches this, even though I love to talk, you know, and I talk a lot to Kevin. I do. I talk a lot to Kevin. We talk a lot, and I'll over talk him a lot. But he's one of the people that I over talk the least, which is why we talk so much. And the reason why I over talk him the least, and why this is so good, is because it is important for, you know, what this really showed me is that one of the reasons why I talk to Kevin so much is because iron sharpens iron. And when all four blades are nicely sharpened katanas, it has been amazing just like to hear every word and every angle. I'm like, oh, I love my angle so much, but I don't even want my angle right now because I'm like, I just want to like toss something out to the room because I know Justin's going to, and then Kevin's going to hit, and then Barry's going to do the double whoosh, and it's just going to be, and it's going to dice it up, and my mind's going to be blown. And this is so cool. I think this is a great thing for me. So I assume it's great for other people, like just to see like this intentional perspective.
Absolutely. And that's why each and every one of you is a part of this group, because your insight's appreciated and respected. For sure. We love it all, man. I do especially. I feel like we have people from every quadrant of life, we'll call it, you know, in terms of age and experience. It's awesome. And I think it's really good when you can listen beyond what you think you already know, you know, and I think a lot of people can learn from that. So I really appreciate you saying, you know, that you're not just good at listening, but why you sit there and just choose to listen. You know, iron sharpens iron. If you're not, it works better to learn what everybody else is learning. Let me say it like this. It's better to learn from everyone else's mistakes instead of just going around making the mistakes everybody else is making. You know?
I have a list you can borrow from.
Hey, there you go.
That's the life experience piece we were talking about earlier.
There you go. See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. But not everyone's as proud to show their list, is what I'm saying, you know?
I don't have any shame on that.
Exactly. All right, guys, I really enjoyed my time talking to you all. That about wraps it up for this week's episode of Real Talk, Real Men. Thank you again so much for giving us your time, your energy, your attention.
Peace be in you guys. Take care of yourselves.
See ya.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for future episodes of Real Talk, Real Men, where we are mindfully redefining masculinity.
And thank you for tuning in to Rise Above TV, where we are empowering humanity and supporting unity. Your likes, shares, and follows are greatly appreciated because they help spread the love. Subscribe to our YouTube and podcast channels.